Welcome to the first in a series of 3 Advocacy 101 broadcasts presented jointly by the American Brain Coalition and the American Neurological Association. I'm Nadine Goldberg, Executive Director of the American Neurological Association. We hope these presentations will help new and experienced advocates alike make an impact on Capitol Hill. To start, we have a message from Representative Cathy McMorris Rodgers, the co-chair of the Congressional Neuroscience Caucus. The Congressional Neuroscience Caucus works to promote better understanding in Congress of how the brain develops, functions, and ages.
Hello to everyone with the American Brain Coalition and the American Neurological Association. It's Cathy McMorris Rodgers. I co-lead the Congressional Neuroscience Caucus with my friend, Congressman Blumenauer. Know that your work is critical. I want to thank you for stepping up, sharing your stories, and advocating for brain research. We're on the verge of major life-saving breakthroughs. These breakthroughs would not only lift one of the biggest cost and care burdens on our healthcare system, but most importantly, transform the lives of millions of people. People like my son, Cole, who has Down syndrome. Nearly 100% of people with Down syndrome develop the brain pathology for Alzheimer's. For hope and cures for these neurological diseases, like Alzheimer's, America can win the future by leading a new era of research and development. With your help, that's why our Neuroscience Caucus is leading again this year to encourage private investment and boost funding for NIH research and the Brain Initiative. So keep up the good work. You all are on the front lines of creating the life-saving breakthroughs we need. On behalf of families everywhere who find hope in your research and work, thank you.
Thank you to Representatives McMorris Rodgers, who along with the CNC co-chair, Representative Earl Blumenauer, are important champions for brain health in Washington, D.C. Before we dig in, we'll hear from a longtime advocate about our goals. Dr. Barbara Geiser is the American Neurological Association's Public Policy and Relations Committee immediate past chair. Dr. Geiser is an internationally recognized clinician and award-winning educator who has specialized in the care of persons with multiple sclerosis since 1982. She joined the UCLA Department of Neurology in 2002 and is Professor Emeritus of Clinical Neurology.
On behalf of the American Neurological Association and the American Brain Coalition, thank you for viewing this series of Advocacy 101 broadcasts. Our goal is to give you a complete overview of advocacy, from answering your questions about what advocacy means to sharing how to conduct successful advocacy meetings, both in Washington, D.C. and where you live, your representatives' home states and districts. The definition of advocate is one who supports a group or a cause. Advocacy is inherent in the conduct of medicine and science. Every time we appeal an insurance denial care, we are advocating for patients. When we conduct research, we are advocating for knowledge that will ultimately lead to better diagnosis and treatment. And when we teach, we are advocating for the next generation of clinicians and scientists. The government makes policies and determines funding for issues of the brain and central nervous system. From clinical care to biomedical research, it's critical to understand and have a voice in the government process. Your influence is important. Take it from me. I have been formally advocating for our patients and our profession for over 10 years, and I've had the privilege of interacting with our elected officials at both state and federal levels. It is so powerful when a physician, scientist, and/or a patient can personally educate a legislator about a specific neurologic condition or research initiative. For example, when I became concerned, my patients were being denied access to appropriate treatment because of the insurance practice of non-medical switching, which occurs when a healthcare plan mandates a change to a patient's treatment on financial rather than medical grounds, I initiated an advocacy effort to educate patients and neurologists in California so they could inform their state representatives about this unfair practice. Neurologists and neuroscientists are the best equipped to inform our legislators as to what our funding priorities are, and more importantly, why they should be supported. We can inform our legislators not only about the monetary requirements for our clinical and research endeavors, but also help them to realize the human costs of the often devastating neurologic conditions we are all working to treat and someday eradicate. Access to care, disability rights, non-discriminatory practices, and even immigration are all areas that impact neurology, and we can inform our elected officials how and why this is so they can make the best and most informed decisions when they act on our behalf. Additionally, as academic neurologists and neuroscientists, we are uniquely poised to advocate for funding for neurologic education to ensure that there will be a next generation of clinicians and scientists. Advocacy makes our voices heard, not only in academic and hospital hallways, but in the corridors of Congress and state legislatures.
So why would we advocate? The federal government has a huge impact on brain health, from funding for research to payments for clinical services. Patient advocacy groups, professional organizations and their members, clinicians and researchers can make their voices heard and influence these policies. We're going to provide you with the tips and tools you need to participate and succeed in advocacy. We want to help you make your voice heard in Washington, D.C. and beyond. What is advocacy? Advocacy is how members and volunteers of organizations, including researchers, clinicians, and patient advocates, exert influence over their elected officials. Some examples are communication with the 3 elected officials who represent you in Washington, persuading a member of Congress to champion an important issue by sharing your personal story, connecting with your leaders through the traditional media and social media. Advocacy is not lobbying. Organizations and their consultants lobby, which includes day-to-day communication and meetings with members of Congress and staff, targeting specific members of Congress to ask for their support or vote on the matters before them. As we all learned back in school, Congress is the government body that makes our laws. The House of Representatives includes 435 members from districts within every state based on population. Every member of the House of Representatives faces election every 2 years. The Senate has 100 members, 2 from each state. Individual senators are elected every 6 years. The executive branch, which is led by the president, overseeing various departments and agencies, implements the laws passed by Congress. It is easy to get started. If you don't already know who your legislators are, you can find out by going to congress.gov. Once you know who is representing you in Washington, take a look at their websites to learn where they stand on legislative issues that affect diseases of the brain and on health and science issues generally. Compare what you find to the positions on ABC and ANA's websites. Are your representatives supported or opposed? If there is no information on these topics, that is instructive too. You may have found an opportunity to educate and recruit a new champion for brain health on Capitol Hill. Continue your research. Learn which committees or subcommittees your legislators serve on and review those websites to understand the jurisdictions of those committees. For example, if you find out your representative serves on the Appropriations Committee, you know they have direct influence on the federal government's investment in biomedical research. Most elected officials' websites include a form for you to contact them and voice your position on issues. And these messages are read and tallied. Become a pen pal. One of the most important things Congress does is determine the federal investment across every government agency, including those that support essential biomedical research into the brain and central nervous system. As you get started, examine the funding environment for the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, Health Research at the Department of Defense, Department of Veterans Affairs Medical Research, and any other agencies in which you or your organization are interested. How much money has Congress appropriated in the current year, and is that an increase over the previous year? How much is the White House requesting from Congress for the next fiscal year? Find out if members of the House and Senate Appropriations Committees are moving ahead with funding, indicating any recommendations for any of these agencies. This information is available on the committee's website and on the ABC resource page. When you speak with or meet with your legislators, make sure you understand and relay the reasons that it is critically important to invest in biomedical research, particularly for brain and central nervous system health. Most importantly, biomedical research saves lives and decreases healthcare costs. Neurological and psychological disorders afflict 50 million Americans per year, at a cost approaching $1 trillion per year, and this number will continue to increase without better diagnostics, treatments, and cures. Biomedical research stimulates the economy. Every dollar invested in research generates more than $2.50 in economic output. It also creates hundreds of thousands of jobs across the US every year. Biomedical research, supported by recent increases in funding for NIH, helps provide the US with a leading innovative edge in the world, but other countries are beginning to outpace America's investment. We need to continue to increase funding for research to be on the forefront of important discoveries. And biomedical research funding helps to train the next generation of medical researchers, helping us continue to hold that innovative edge. One last example. Neuroscience research is critical for future drug development. The process to develop drugs to treat neurological and psychiatric conditions takes longer, is more costly, and has higher failure rates than the development process for drugs to treat other conditions. So we must advocate for this investment. These issues are compelling, but even more powerful when they are delivered by a patient advocate. Let's hear from an experienced patient advocate.
I've really had the privilege of working with patient organizations now for over 25 years, and I am constantly blown away by patients and their families' willingness to share their personal stories to help advance the understanding of that particular health issue that will lead to more research funding. I've experienced the power of a personal story and how they can really move legislators and their staffs to helping us to make sure that there is funding for good science. I recognize, and I think many do, that it's a big deal to share the intimate details of your particular brain health issue. And I think that makes your story that much more powerful.
Our thanks to Janet Hieshetter. Professionals, including researchers, clinicians, and educators, are equally important in the advocacy process.
As a researcher, professor, and clinician, I advocate to share how federal investment in biomedical research will lead to important discoveries that will have a direct impact on patients all across this country. Whether you're a researcher or a healthcare provider, your own personal advocacy story should focus on the impact of your research, your clinical or educational efforts, and how they affect the lives of patients and students, including your legislature's constituents. Don't just focus on your own research, rather demonstrate how federal funding improves all of our communities. It's been my pleasure as part of the American Neurological Association to partner with the ABC, the American Brain Coalition, and the Society for Neuroscience in advocacy efforts on Capitol Hill. I've been so impressed at how congressional staff, congressmen are very eager to hear personal stories of research and how biomedical research can have an impact on the everyday lives of their constituents.
Our thanks to Dr. McArthur and all of our speakers on today's presentation. And thank you to all who participated. I hope you'll view the second broadcast in this series, which will teach you how to conduct meetings with your representatives. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions and visit the American Brain Coalition's website for more resources.
Advocating is a way for you to battle back against your neurological disorder. While the researchers do what we need them to do in their laboratories, we can help them get funding for that, for really good science. And it's your personal story that's going to make a difference. It can be the call to action for that particular member of Congress to help them understand why funding neurological brain research is important. And you can do that. You can make the difference.